New tonight, a groundbreaking study underway at Boston Children's Hospital could predict whether a child as young as 3 months is at risk of developing autism.
Right now, most children can't receive a reliable diagnosis until 12 months. But as Boston 25 News reporter Heather Hedges tells us, the hope is that one day it will lead to not just early detection, but prevention.
What does a lion say? Roar. Roar.
Chase Minicucci seems to be a typically developing toddler. He's learning to point and use words to express his needs. But Chase and his mom, Hillary, are at Boston Children's because Chase has been identified as at risk. He has an older brother who is 7 who has autism.
Did the testing, and one day after his 4th birthday, the doctor said, so your son has autism.
Hillary and her husband also have a 6-year-old daughter who does not have autism. But autism is more prevalent in boys, and research shows 1 in 5 children whose siblings have autism will also be on the spectrum. So Hillary spent the first year of Chase's life watching his behavior like a hawk and worrying.
I was literally making myself crazy over it.
But Hillary got Chase into a study at Boston Children's Cognitive Neuroscience Lab involving 99 siblings of children with autism.
Look at that bubble.
Infants as young as 3 months old and toddlers up to 36 months spend only a few minutes wearing this cap with over 100 sensors. The TV showing cartoons is also an eye tracker. Director Dr. Charles Nelson says by studying their EEG signals, the electrical activity in the brain, they can predict which infants are likely to develop autism.
The overall finding is they tend not to look at faces as much as children who have no risk factors. What we've seen is that at 3 months of age, we see patterns of brain activity that basically predict who 3 years later will develop autism.
One of the big unknowns is when is autism developed? Does this shed any light on whether it happens prenatally or after birth?
It's very unlikely that brain development was perfectly normal until birth and then something happened. The fact that we see it so early, just at 3 months, makes me think that it started before birth. But what derailed brain development, we don't know.
Dr. Nelson stresses we're not at the point yet where a 3-month-old can be diagnosed, but he or she could be flagged. And the next step is developing early intervention strategies for that age group.
Can we develop an intervention that will prevent those kids from developing autism?
Ready, set, go.
As for Chase Minicucci, right now he doesn't seem to be exhibiting some of the warning signs. And his mom says that's given her some much-needed reassurance.
All right, I can start to enjoy my baby now.
And because the EEG caps are relatively inexpensive, Dr. Nelson hopes someday soon every local pediatrician's office could have one, and all infants could be identified within a critical window of time. I'm Heather Hedges, Boston 25 News.
New tonight and only on Boston 25. Never too late to realize a dream. At least it wasn't for a World War II veteran from Leominster who is about to celebrate a big milestone, finally getting a high school diploma.
Boston 25 News reporter Heather Hedges sat down with the sailor and his family ahead of the big celebration, 70 years overdue.
Good morning.
Good morning.
At 94 years young, Roland Martineau has led a full life. It hasn't always been an easy one, but he has a lot to be thankful for. 4 sons, 17 grandchildren, 14 great-grandchildren, and a great-great-grandbaby on the way.
And it's going to be a boy.
A boy?
Yep.
What's his name? You want to join the Seabees?
Maybe.
Roland is a decorated Navy Seabee who served in the Pacific in World War II.
We went out and we looking for trouble, we found it. And we took care of it.
But the one thing Roland doesn't have is a high school diploma. He grew up in Leominster, and his mother passed away when he was young. His father took off.
I was off, and I was living with my grandma and grandfather, and they could ill afford keeping me in school. So when I got out of school, and I went to work.
He married and went off to war. When he returned home, he became a welder and never went back to school. He lost his wife 6 years ago.
Not getting his high school diploma is something Roland rarely talked about through the years, except for in here.
His barber of 15 years, Donna Salvi, and her boyfriend, Leominster firefighter Bobby Penning, started taking Roland out for a regular lunch. And that's when he told them about his small regret.
He's just an easy person to love. He reminded me a lot of my father, who would be about his age right now.
They decided to make getting that diploma for Roland their mission. A lot more work than you might think.
I went to the the Veteran Center of Leominster, and then I went to the mayor's office. Then I went to the school department.
It was going to be a surprise.
And then there was a problem. Roland recently contracted pneumonia.
He said when I went to see him in the hospital that he wasn't leaving the hospital this time. And so we kind of told him, we said, Pepe, you have a really big surprise coming up. You have to hang on.
Within a day, Roland's health had turned around completely. Now he's back home, and on June 2nd, he'll walk across the stage at Leominster High School's graduation. It's been 70 years in the making. And Donna is going to make sure Roland looks great in his cap and gown.
He says, I can't wait to get my hair cut the day before my graduation.
In Leominster, I'm Heather Hedges, Boston 25 News. Former Giants and Buccaneers player Jeff Hatch says he did whatever it took to stay in the game. And his struggles with addiction nearly cost him his life. Now he's demanding the NFL take action to help other players before it's too late.
I've seen a lot of guys die, you know, and it's tough because I get it. That's my story, but it doesn't have to be that way.
His story starts with a guy who had everything going for him, an All-American at Penn, drafted by the Giants in 2002.
Did you get to pick 76 as your number?
Well, my college number was 75.
Jeff Hatch started getting attention in the early 2000s after he was featured in the ESPN documentary, Hey Rookie, Welcome to the NFL. After the Giants, he went on to play for Tampa Bay. He was living out his dream, but the physical pain was tremendous.
Imagine putting your body through a 35-mile-per-hour car crash 65 times in a day and waking up the next morning knowing you have to do it again.
He suffered a severe back injury, but it wasn't hard getting his hands on prescription drugs.
A trainer, a teammate, a hanger-on who wants to be friends and provide a service.
Especially in the NFL, where working through the pain is part of the job.
That's part of how you gain value in that world.
Right.
This is a guy who can play hurt. And part of that is taking opiates.
And suddenly, this Ivy League grad was hooked on painkillers.
Take 1 to 2 every 4 to 6 hours as needed for pain. And then I remember the day that I went, yeah, but this will probably help with the emotional pain I'm feeling right now, too.
And when that injury spelled the end of his career at just 26 years old,
I woke up every day hoping I would die. And I tried to drug myself to death.
his parents found him in his Tampa Bay townhome, nearly dead from an overdose. They got him help, and today, Jeff is clean.
And how long have you been sober?
11 and a half years.
Wow, congratulations.
Thank you.
Now he tours the country speaking to kids about drugs, and he works for Granite Recovery Centers in New Hampshire helping other addicts.
Because he's a soldier for recovery. He's tireless, you know, he day in, day out, he's out there carrying the message. He really is a warrior for this thing.
But Jeff's worried about current NFL players, especially the ones who get cut.
So that's what this is about for me. It's about trying to help those guys that I know are suffering in silence.
He says the NFL isn't doing enough to make sure players suffering from addiction get treatment, or to end the current culture where he says locker rooms can be candy stores.
Many Heisman Trophy winners that I have, you know, hey bro, I need a couple. Here you go, brother.
Jeff is calling on the NFL to provide recovery coaches and attack the problem aggressively. He recently stole a moment with Commissioner Roger Goodell and asked him to do more. He says Goodell was receptive.
I couldn't ask for a better reaction from him. But it's a big business he's running.
So why do you think the NFL hasn't addressed this?
I think they haven't addressed it because they feel like they have bigger fish to fry. What I would say to you is wrong. These guys are dying, but because these are men that if they can get well and get right, will have an opportunity to help so many other people.
So the NFL has a partnership with an addiction recovery center in Florida, and the NFL tells me players can receive financial assistance for recovery. And the NFL Players Association also has a substance abuse program, but Hatch says from what he's seen, players need to seek out the treatment, and he says, again, often players need someone to intervene. I'm Heather Hedges, Boston 25 News.
Fox 25's Heather Hedges spoke exclusively with one of the few inmates to serve time there and be released about what life would be like behind those bars.
This particular type of prison is hell because of the way, it functions, its mission to break down human beings.
This former prisoner calls it hell in a very small place. A 12 by 7 foot cell, just a slot for food, a concrete bed, toilet, shower, and a black and white TV.
Living in a room the size of your bathroom.
That's solitary confinement in the highest security prison in the nation, the federal Supermax prison in Florence, Colorado, at the foothills of the Rockies. If Johar Tsarnaev is sent there, he'll be joining shoe bomber Richard Reed, Unabomber Ted Kaczynski, Olympic bomber Eric Rudolph, and 9/11 conspirator Zacharias Moussaoui.
Now, this is not a country club prison. This is
some video from inside, but with access so limited, the only way to really know what life is like there is to hear about it through the eyes of someone who spent a lot of time there.
This is ADX.
Ray Luke Levasseur spent 5 years in the 90s in Florence, also known as ADX, short for Administrative Maximum Facility. In the late 70s and 80s, Ray led a political organization responsible for 8 bombings in the Boston area.
Well, these are 7 of us were charged in Boston.
We found Ray 4 hours from Boston in rural Waldo, Maine.
So I got a job as a logger.
Now a free man. But his years at ADX are something he will carry with him to his grave, calling them some of the longest years of his life. Prisoners there spend 23 hours a day in isolation.
What does 23 hours a day by yourself do to your mind?
Well, it's going to warp it in some ways, the same way, because it's a traumatic experience.
Ray calls the prisoners' cells boxcar cells and says by design, they effectively shut off the human senses.
Where there's a solid door, so you cannot, step up to the bars in your cell and holler to another prisoner at another part of the tier you're on. You can't see anything. You can't look left or right at all.
Give me a sense of a typical day inside a boxcar.
It produces this nightmarish mindset that I think has a tendency to get more into the paranoid and the violent.
Prisoners can earn time in a rec yard for good behavior, but they're never allowed there together.
Dog kennels, that's exactly what they are. If you went to a dog kennel, you'd see exactly the same thing, these wired runs, maybe 20, 25 feet long, very narrow.
It's a sort of 21st century Alcatraz.
8 years ago, 60 Minutes spoke with former warden Robert Hood, the only ADX warden to ever speak publicly.
I don't know what hell is, but I do know that the assumption would be for a free person, would be pretty close to it.
And ADX is not without controversy. We Skyped with Colorado attorney Laura Rovner, who is representing a group of ADX prisoners suing over the conditions.
It's a place that can slowly drive you insane, even if you start out without having any sensible mental illness. It is a terrible, frightening, almost scientifically engineered form of isolation. It truly is a living death.
And that's exactly how Ray Levasseur describes it too.
You send a young man there that's 21, 22 years old, at some point they will think back and say, maybe I should have taken my shot with the death penalty.
To date, at least 7 prisoners have killed themselves inside ADX or Supermax, and many more have attempted suicide. As that former warden, Robert Hood, candidly told the New York Times, ADX or Supermax is not designed for rehabilitation. Our request to speak with the current warden, guards, or have any access inside were denied. I'm Heather Hedges, Fox 25 News. Welcome back. A South Shore mother battling miscarriage after miscarriage on her 5th try finally seems to be having a successful pregnancy, only to be struck with another incredibly difficult health diagnosis. I recently sat down with this inspiring mom and one of her doctors to find out how she overcame just incredible odds and what she'd like other expectant and current mothers to know.
3-month-old Coraline Killefer and mom Jody are meeting with the doctor who helped deliver little Cora.
What do you think, little cutie?
Jody says Brigham and Women's maternal fetal medicine specialist, Dr. Catherine Economy, is a major reason that today Jody and her husband Nate have a child.
She's great. She's like, I have the perfect kid.
Jody spent the past 2 years pregnant on and off, but miscarrying 4 different times. An emotional roller coaster for the Braintree couple.
We were both worked up and found that there was absolutely nothing medically wrong with us. It was just, bad luck.
But then on their 5th try, their luck turned around. Jody made it past the 12-week mark for the first time.
So you'd be like, okay, I think this is gonna happen. I think this is gonna happen. And then bam, that's when we got hit with the diagnosis.
The diagnosis was breast cancer, something Jody didn't even have a family history of.
The first thing obviously was, am I going to have to choose between me or the baby?
But thanks to Dr. Economy and Jody's oncologist, Jody didn't have to make that choice. Her doctors worked together and came up with a plan for Jody that included surgery and chemotherapy while she was pregnant.
So it is possible for women who are pregnant to undergo chemo and still deliver a healthy baby.
So we can't do things like radiation during pregnancy, but we routinely do surgery during pregnancy, and we do chemotherapy.
Dr. Economy says Jody's determination and positivity made all the difference.
Because she always came in with a smile on her face, even when things were down.
And Coraline made it to term and is a perfectly happy and healthy infant. Still, the fight isn't over for Jody. She's getting ready for a mastectomy followed by radiation to target her lymph nodes. But she says Coraline gives her daily motivation and inspiration.
God won't give you any more than you can handle. You can handle a lot more than you think.
She's just an incredible woman. It was such a privilege to meet Jody. She now blogs about her experiences to reach out to other women. That's the name of her blog right there, Sweet Baby Sour Cancer. Her family also set up a website to help Jody with her medical expenses. You'll find a link to both on our website, myfoxboston.com.
Only on Boston 25 News, a woman who says she was raped by a high school teacher is now breaking her silence 40 years later. Boston 25 News reporter Heather Hedges asked the DA what rights a victim has when the crime happened so long ago.
He's supposed to be someone you look up to as a kid.
She trusted him because he was her teacher, and she says he abused her trust because she was an easy target.
Because I was extremely shy, and I was in his class, and I was easy to manipulate.
We're not identifying the woman or naming the former teacher, but she says the sexual abuse started in 1979 when she was his student at Winthrop High School. She says she was too afraid to tell anyone, including her parents or police.
All these years later, what finally encouraged you to come forward?
I always thought it was my fault, and I didn't want to tell anyone. But a couple years ago, I started having physical difficulties.
The building has changed, but this is where she says it happened, at school and at the teacher's house. And she says it went on for 6 years because she didn't know how to get out of the situation.
The man no longer teaches in Winthrop and has relocated. Suffolk County District Attorney Dan Connolly's office investigated, but criminal charges weren't an option because at the time the statute of limitations was only 6 years and has long expired.
Our people thought she was truthful. This is not uncommon. I've been doing this for a long time, and we see victims of sexual assault delay their disclosure.
With the recent spotlight on sex crimes because of Harvey Weinstein and #MeToo, more victims are telling their stories. And Conley says even if a potential victim thinks a case may be too old to prosecute, he or she should still come forward.
We do a full and thorough investigation, and even if we can't bring charges, what we do have here in this office are a great array of victim witness advocates.
And the laws changed in 2002, allowing teen victims 27 years now to report sex abuse. Civil action may also be an option, and it may also encourage other victims to come forward. That's this woman's hope. Her message now, it's never too late.
That's the reason why I'm coming forward, so anyone else could come forward.
I'm Heather Hedges, Boston 25 News.